animators, and artists. Are you curious about the craft that goes into rigged 2D animation? Well, we invited three guests who have experience in cutout animation on ambitious and artistically interesting projects. This discussion will cover topics such as the process of 2D rigged animation, pushing poses on rigs, skills essential for 2D animators on rig productions, as well as common misconceptions about rigs. So, Bonnie, Jack, and James, welcome to the live stream.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we start with a quick introduction? Jack, why don't you introduce yourself with your name and a brief description of your current or most recent studio role?
Of course. Hello, I'm Jack. I am a 2D animator and build artist. I've worked on a couple adult animated shows. I've worked on a couple of kids shows, a couple of short form shows. I haven't worked on any movies or 44-minute specials before, but that's always the goal. My favorite things to animate are bouncy and snappy animations. I love timing accents, and also in a lot of my personal work, I love animating musical numbers and just people singing and saying really funny lines.
I love the combination between like music and animation because both rely on timing so much.
100%. It's just really satisfying to get the timing right.
There's so many opportunities there. Bonnie, can you introduce yourself with your name and a brief description of your current or most recent studio role?
Absolutely. Hi guys, I'm Bonnie Mier from the Netherlands, and I'm an animator and asset designer. I've worked in a few places all over Europe, and I'm currently based in Kilkenny, Ireland, where I worked on both TV series and feature films with Cartoon Saloon and Lighthouse, and I'm currently a head animator in Boulder Media. And my favorite things to animate are also very snappy comedy bits and very expressive characters. I love those. And I draw a lot. That's about
I really love all the work that comes out of both Cartoon Saloon and Lighthouse. I think they're excellent studios.
Yeah, they are. It's been really cool to grow in those. I've learned a lot from them.
There's just so much talent in Kilkenny.
Absolutely.
James, can you introduce yourself and give a brief description of your current or most recent studio role?
Sure. My name is James Nethery. I'm an Atlanta-based animator and rigging artist, harmony rigging artist. I've been mostly doing rigging over the last few years, but this year I've actually been jumping back into animation, which has been good timing. I've worked for, let's see, my last big role was over at Awesome Incorporated. I was a rigging artist on the Jody movie, which is coming out sometime next year. So that was my first feature film. And yeah, it's basically like if you're looking like at a even like a CG rig, it's like almost a 2D version of that. Like if you look at what like Pixar does, where they'll have like a model of the character, it's kind of like that in 2D. And the other half of the question was I prefer to call it probably rigged animation, because that's just what I'm used to calling it. And yeah, so yeah.
And Jack, what is your take on when industry artists mention like 2D rigged, cutout, or puppet animation? What do we mean? And which of those terms do you prefer to use?
Well, I don't know if I can top James's definition of it. I felt that was like the dictionary definition of the term. But I feel that when mentioning rigged, cutout, and puppet animation, I think of like a bunch of vectors that are being manipulated. I think vectoring is a very, very important aspect to rig and cutout animation, because it's a it's a lot about making sure that things are clean and not breaking. So I feel like in order to get people to understand rigs and how to animate them, I try and get people to understand how vectors work as well. I think that's a different, around the same similarity to James's definition, but going a bit differently with it. And I think with rig versus cutout versus pop out, what we prefer than the name to be. I prefer rig and cutout mostly because if you search puppet animation, a lot of it, when you look it up, it's a lot of outdated stuff, not the current, like what's going on with rig animation nowadays. It's a lot of stuff from like 10 years ago. It's just for the basis of search engine optimization. But when I was starting to get into cutout and rig animation, puppet animation was the term. So if I end up using puppet animation in this discussion, it is just a Freudian slip from 10 years ago.
Usually when I search puppet animation, I'll get the Muppets or something that pops up. So
animation based on like Kermit the Frog.
Yeah, exactly. Or stop motion animation. I'll get a lot of that as well.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how like SEO can influence conversations that people have. That's pretty wild. Bonnie, from your point of view, when industry artists mention 2D rigged, cutout, or puppet animation, what do we mean? And which of those terms do you prefer to use?
So I don't really have much to add to the explanation. I see it as a puppet that we manipulate instead of drawing it frame by frame. But I think my preferred way is calling it rigged animation on the basis that at least the productions I've worked on, we try to make it look not cut out, and we always go for a hand-drawn feeling. So, and rigged is just the medium that we work in. So, yeah, that's what I tend to go for.
In your opinion,
You have different animation styles as well, but it all looks like it's drawn by the same person, which is such a benefit on big production. No one, like, you still have to be a model, but that's an excellent cat. Sorry. It's easier to stay a model. So even if, like all the juniors can still make a fantastic looking shot on the basis that the designs are just there and don't need much extra help in that regard.
James, I've got two questions for you.
Yes.
Question number one, who's the cute calico?
Oh, so this is Betty.
Oh,
She's my baby.
Aw. Second question is, what do you consider to be the benefits and challenges of working with character rigs?
Basically, all of what Bonnie said, it kind of condenses the pipeline down. For TV, it makes things a lot more manageable because you don't have all those extra steps. You don't have to send things to clean up and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's one of the bigger benefits of doing rigged animation. And also, like what was mentioned before, I'm repeating a lot of stuff, but you can use the same rigs for 5 or 6 or 7 seasons. I know I've never worked on Rick and Morty, but I'm assuming that they're using at least somewhat the same rigs that they were using, 3 or 4 years ago. They probably updated the rigs, but they're probably using the same, mouth shapes and all that. Season after use animation and poses as well. So yeah, it's very efficient, especially for TV animation.
Jack, what are your thoughts on the benefits and challenges of working with character rigs?
Well, Bonnie and James took the words out of my mouth. I feel like that's going to be a recurring theme in today's talk. I 100% agree with not having to do ink and paint. It makes things really faster. I think I'm going to build off of James's point by saying that like reusing the rigs. I think that also helps with the incidentals in the show. If the design language in the show works that way, where it's like you can build one rig and like use bits and pieces of it to build off of other characters. I know there was one show that I was working on for a lot of the human characters. They had very much the same hands, and so there would only have to be like one hand pack, or it would be easier to grab hands from other. Also, building upon other things is that it's easier to be consistent, specifically with the timing, especially with like tweening in Harmony. It's easier to keep it consistent with like, all right, use 50 E's and then convert it to twos. Set it to stop motion keyframes, and I think it's easier to get it more consistent when working with rigs compared to working with traditional. And as far as challenges go, I think the biggest one that I've ran into is fixing breaks in the rig, like making sure that's consistent with the characters, and like double checking it like 1,000 times just so I don't get notes from my director that the line doesn't line up on the elbow, and then having to go back, fix it, and then render it. But I think that's a lot faster working with rigs compared to having to do it in the cleanup phase.
Jack, what does an average day as an animator on 2D rig productions look like for you?
Ooh, an average day for me, I think it'll differ based on pipeline stuff, like whether you're doing turn in keys first and then get those approved, or if you're just doing keys and in-betweens, or if you're just doing retakes. I think it differs from time to time, but I think going through an episode, I think it starts with the kickoff meeting, like what are the goals and how we go about it. And then when it comes to the weekly stuff, my Monday starts with looking at how many shots do I have to get done? 10, 20, infinity, the regular amount, and breaking it down smarter so I don't have to crunch to get everything done by Sunday night or like Friday night or whenever things are due. So if I have 10 shots due, I'm going to make sure to get 2 shots done a day, so that 2 on Monday, 2 on Tuesday, and then by Friday, it feels all the more satisfying when I have those done and I don't have to crunch. And I can also get client notes done from shots that I turned in the previous week on top of the 10 shots. So it is a lot more manageable. But when it comes to turning in shots for like keys and in-betweens, that's what I'm doing right now on the project that I'm on. We don't have a key phase. It's just keys and in-betweens at once, and then we turn it in. One thing I will absolutely do is I will wait to do the lip syncing last. Like when it's time for me to turn in a bunch of shots, I will open up a Harmony file, and then I'll just do the lip syncing, just because it's a lot faster for me to just do a bunch of keys and in-betweens all at once, instead of having to stop with lip syncing, because you just lose that momentum. And I also have to pause the music or the podcast that I'm listening to just so I can do the lip syncing and then turn it back on. It's all about keeping myself going.
Oh, that's interesting. So do you tend to work with like bigger sort of gestures first, then go into more specific detailed things later?
I tend to. Ooh, that's a really good question. Sometimes I'll just do the order of the sequences, the order of the shots, like shot 1, then shot 2, then shot 3, just so I don't have to worry about getting any hookup notes, because then I could just copy the key from the previous shot into the next shot and not have to worry about doing all of this confusing stuff. But sometimes I'll go absolutely crazy and I'll just do shots that have the same camera, just so I make sure that I copy the camera from each shot that it's the same for, just so I don't have to get notes about that.
All
It
right.
makes it more organized.
Yeah, that makes sense. Bonnie, what does an average day as an animator on 2D rig productions look like for you?
I tend to start my week prioritizing my scenes, looking at my task lists. I'll check, just like Jack, what scenes I can, where there's reuse, where there's hookups. If there's a key scene that will provide poses that I can reuse in different scenes, I'll do those first. And based on that, I start posing out my characters. Depending on the schedule, I tend to have multiple scenes at the same time in the pipeline, so I don't have to wait for feedback on my poses, and I can start the next posing scene. If those are approved, I'll move on to the keys. And once those are approved, I'll go on to animation, and that's where I do my secondary action and lip sync as well. I'll do those at the very end. And currently I'm a head animator. Like I started a few months before the actual animation team is starting, so I'm just making assets for the library and master controllers. So I just have a master spreadsheet with run cycles that need to be done for characters, and I'll just be crunching those out. And yeah, that's a bit of a different day than I'm used to. But it's fun to be at the start of a production for once, so that's nice.
And James, what does an average day as an animator on 2D rig productions look like for you?
So it usually depends on the production, but usually, yeah, like I'll have my list of shots that I have to get done, and depending on the studio, sometimes some studios will set it up where, okay, this month we're doing all the keys for the entire episode, and then the next month we're doing all the animation. So I'll be working through my keys. If it's a production where we're switching off between keys and animation, like you key your shot and then animate it, I'll usually key a shot out, feed that to my director, wait back for notes, then start the next shot, and kind of just keep the shots going throughout the week. Hit my deadline at the end of the week. However many shots. Usually, I'm not running into too many like hard quotas at studios anymore, but usually, getting that 30 seconds of animation a week or whatever it is. I'm not sure if that's the actual number or not. But yeah, just trying to meet those deadlines and get the animation as polished as I can within the time frame that I've given. And yeah, just kind of getting really good feedback from the directors and the leads, trying to follow that as closely as possible. One thing I love when that leads and directors do, they'll do what's called a red line, where they'll draw over your poses to kind of tweak things, and get it looking right. And I really like that, because it's very helpful than just like either verbal or written notes, because it gives you a visual of exactly what they want, which is great. It's especially helpful with things like facial expressions or hands. If there's a very specific hand pose the director wants, he can draw it out for you. So yeah, it's so my week kind of looks like that, where I'm just kind of dealing with shots as they come in and are ready. So yeah.
James, in your opinion, what skills would you consider to be important for artists who are working with character rigs?
I would say a good sense of posing and timing would be um, good skills to have. Also, um, just a general knowledge. I guess it would be spacing of like eases and things like that, where your um, characters aren't just like kind of like literally moving from pose to pose. You want to have some arcs in there. You want to have some nice breakdowns. Um, yeah,
It makes me think of like the early Newgrounds animation where you
yeah,
see like a
exactly.
lot
Where
of
it's like it's
animation with like no easing on the tweens.
yeah. You don't want your animation to look like a robot. You know, you want it to look natural.
Jack, what's your take on the skills that are important for animators working with character rigs?
Ooh, I was gonna go with timing and spacing as well. I 100% agree. Mostly because I've seen a lot of animations where it's just on ones, and also the easing isn't working. I think the easing types in Harmony really helped me figure out how the easing in Harmony works specifically, and how to get it when you're on a project that is on ones. But I think when you're starting out, I think just having a strong grasp of timing and spacing and just those 12 principles, it 100% will help you out. What it'll help also in conjunction of learning the program, where if you have those timing and spacing principles, learning the software of learning the software will be no sweat, a walk in
Yeah,
the park
I
even.
think it's really interesting too that no matter like what tools you're adding to an artist's toolkit, whether they're working with a pencil on like an animation disc, or you're working with tools like Harmony, the 12 principles, the sort of things that they came up at Disney Animation in the 1940s, are still guiding principles for animation today.
Well, I agree. I think it's also a testament to Harmony, where it tries and succeeds at trying to have that traditional feel to it, so that you don't have to worry that much about the software, and you can worry more about making sure the timing and spacing and arcs and the appeal is there.
We should put that in the box.
Ooh.
Bonnie, what skills would you consider important for animators working with character rigs?
Well, I absolutely agree that all the animation principles that are there for hand drawn are completely apply to rigged animation as well. I think good draftsmanship is super handy. It makes you be able to push poses and draw new drawing exposures like hands and faces and everything. And specifically for Harmony, I'd also say have decent organizational skills. It's very easy to get messy, so really make sure you're animating on the right pack. Keep your node view clear. Like if someone else opens your scene and you've counter animated or your pivot points are all over the place, it's going to be really painful. So just be very conscious and plan ahead, and then Harmony will be your best friend. Yeah, something like that.
Well, I mean, per your first point too, I think there are a lot of people who think, well, if I'm working with rigged animation, then I don't have to focus on my drawing skills. But that's not often the case. Often you need to be a good artist to animate with 2D rigs.
Absolutely.
So it's hard to shape the rig if you don't know what the hand's supposed to look like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's like it. You'll be able to animate something, but if you can draw it, you'll just be a better animator for it. So, yeah.
Bonnie, I wanted to ask you, what are some like common misconceptions about 2D animation with rigs that you've encountered throughout your career in animation?
So I know some people think that you let the computer do a lot of stuff where you just have a button where you press animate and you walk away from
We
your
don't
desk.
talk about the animate button.
But
It's a secret.
yeah, no, I'll keep that in my toolkit. But it's still like obviously the harmony helps you along with what you're making, but in the end, it's still a human-made product, and so you can't let the computer do too much thinking for you. It is a super helpful tool, but you have to go in as a person and fix it. Can't really think of another misconception at the moment, but I'll be very happy to hear what you guys have come up with.
James, what are some common misconceptions about 2D animation with rigs that you've encountered?
I think the biggest misconception is that the rig will do everything for you. You know, it's going a little bit off what Bonnie was saying. But I would say my biggest advice to animators working with rigs is don't be afraid to break the rig if you need to get something very specific. Don't be afraid to redraw where you need to. If something isn't working, if the deformers, excuse me, if the deformers are making it a little too, like the lines are breaking or something, just make a new drawing substitution and redraw it. You don't have to just accept what the rig gives you. So that would be what what the biggest misconception would be, is that the rig does everything. The rig, what I always tell people is that the rig will get you 80, even 90% of the way there, but you're going to have to do something for most shots. If it's just a shot where the character is talking to the camera, maybe you won't have to do that much. You might have to do like some manual like lip sync or something like that. But if it's a shot where the character is running around and jumping all over the place, yeah, you're gonna have to tweak some stuff, you know, to get it looking exactly how the director wants it to look.
And Jack, what are some common misconceptions about 2D animation with rigs that you've encountered?
A big misconception that I'll say, because this is how I animated when I was starting out in cutout and rig animation, is that you don't have to draw new arms or forearms and draw or like manipulate it in any way. Like when I started messing around with the rigs, I didn't really know what foreshortening was, so it was just either lifting it up and having it be the end of the day, to go back to the stop motion and marionette talk that we were talking about, or if I needed to do some sort of perspective or foreshortening before I knew the term foreshortening, I would skew the piece into place. And that is, you absolutely shouldn't do that, because it manipulates, it messes with the line art, and it's more than likely not in the correct perspective. So I think drawing arms and forearms, and doing roughs over your rig will absolutely help out with that. And also drawing forearms and being mindful of that and the perspective, it gets a bit into in-betweening, where if I have my arm up here and it goes down here, I want it to have that nice movement to it. I don't want it to be like this, because that is not natural. And so that once you study like arms and forearms, you start to notice like how to make the movement smoother, and also you start to notice like, oh, this is how the elbow works and how it lines up to the chest and the torso.
That is such a good answer. I think that that's an interesting thing that happens a lot with like rigs, where you sort of see a rig where like the animation is very much like approached as if it's a paper doll, and you don't have foreshortening on the limbs, and they don't move in 3D space. They just sort of move as if they're a drawing that you're rotating on a pivot. And I think that if you have all those tools, then you can do much more interesting things. Jack, I wanted to ask you, What separates average animation using character rigs from the most ambitious and interesting productions? What can artists do to improve the results? And I think you mentioned one, but do you have any other ideas?
Yeah, the forearm one is definitely one that I try and watch out for because I've gotten retake notes on that. But I think one that when I started studying rig and cutout animation a lot more, one thing that I did start to notice was the overlap and secondary action on the hair. I feel like that's a very big thing that can help make the character be uh, feel more vibrant and like it's not a puppet or a rig specifically. Um, and also if a character or an animal has like floppy floppy ears, I love seeing overlapping action on those. Like just I think what separates the average animation from the more interesting rig animations is that they're able to nail like the little details and like little subtle character acting things, like head shakes, for example, like having the head and the eyes be more alive. And I think with tools and like harmony, like we're able to focus more on the nuances of character acting instead of making sure that everything works the whole time. Um, I think for what can artists do to improve the results, I think from personal experience on personal projects and stuff, I think just having a show or a movie, a cartoon, just something to go back and influence what you're working on. Like this is the look, this is the feel that I am striving for, and to just study and study it and get as close as you can. Because if you have that goal, then you're not going to have to do a lot of second guessing on how you want the style of the animation to be.
I like that answer. So what you're saying is like one of the things that you can do to improve is to look at other examples of the craft and study it and just be really interested.
Yeah, and just having a style guide um, helps a long way, not only on individual projects, but also on group professional projects. Like if you list like one show or cartoon or something that you're looking to mimic the style of, and you say that one thing, then there's a strong chance that a lot of the people on the team will be like, oh, I get what you're talking about, or I can bring this specific vision to what I'm working to the shots that I'm working on because I was also influenced by it.
Just picturing a bunch of artists and animators sharing Sakuga clips.
Yeah.
Bonnie, in your opinion, what separates average animation using character rigs from the most interesting productions, and what can artists and studios do to improve the results?
So I fully agree what everything Jack said there. I think it's really important to keep characters alive. Try to find accents in lip sync where you can open the eyes a bit further, do a head shake or a tilt, or even a quick eye dart. Like it only has to be 4 frames, but it's really subtle. And just blink a few times, do a little weight shift, but don't do it when it's unnecessary. Like it's a very intuitive process, but make your characters feel real instead of just a puppet that's standing there saying its lines. And how to improve it? Yeah, just occasionally act your scenes out. That helps me really find where I need to lay the emotion at what I tend to listen to the audio and try to feel where how I say something, and it's really fun figuring out how to apply that to your animation, and I really think that brings so much life to a character. Yeah, something like that.
And James, in your opinion, what separates like average animation using character rigs from the most interesting productions, and what can artists and studios do to improve the results?
I think a lot of what separates like the more interesting productions is like more details in the face and more details on like the head and the body area where the body's kind of like rotating around. Shoulders can be very expressive. Um, Heads tilting instead of just moving flat side to side. Um, a good example of like a animation that I found to be really cool was in the Bob's Burgers movie. In the certain song sequences, you could really tell that they choreographed like the dance sequences and stuff like that. And it was all, I believe the animation was done up at Mercury Filmworks, so it was all rigged animation. But it had a very realistic, like, but it was obviously um, very stylized designs. But when they were dancing around and everything, it's like, oh, you could really tell that they shot live action reference and that they choreographed it, and then it had some thought behind it instead of just thinking that these characters were puppets that were just moving around flatly. You know, it had the goal of looking hand drawn, and I think that is a good goal that really separates um, productions like that are done at Mercury, like Hilda and Centaur World and stuff like that, where it has as much it looks as good or better than than some of the hand drawn stuff that comes out of TV animation. So yeah.
Oh, for sure.
Absolutely.
One question that I want to ask is, James, do you have advice for animators who are interested in working with 2D rigs?
Yeah, there's a lot of 2D rigs that are floating around out there that are available to use. I know Cubum Lee has his olive character, which is great.
Those are
I always
excellent.
I always point people towards that. And there's a Scott Pilgrim rig out there as well. That's great. And there's a couple others, but just just download those rigs and play around with them. Do some animation with them. And those are professional quality rigs that you will get in a studio. Um, yeah, so play around with those and see what other people are doing with rigs and let that inspire you as well. Go to like a site like the 11-Second Club and download their piece of dialogue and animate that with the rig. So yeah, that would be my advice.
Jack, do you have any advice for animators who are interested in working with 2D rigs?
Yes, my first piece of advice is to please use stop motion keyframes. I didn't know about that for like my first few months working in Harmony, and then I found out about it and it changed my world. Like, yes, I can animate on twos. I don't have to animate on ones now. And I was talking to a friend from college, and they saw a junior year film that I worked on, and they were really happy because I finally found out what stop motion keyframes were. There was this momentous moment, and I think going off of James's point about looking for rigs, like the Scott Pilgrim one and the olive rig, I think just taking advantage of how many more resources there are out there compared to I want to say a few years ago, but I think by then it was already starting to grow. I think by I'll say 2016, 2017, there's a lot more people making tutorials. There's a lot more people making rigs that you can easily download and learn. And I think the biggest point that I'll stress is that instead of there being one tutorial for one specific thing in Harmony, now there's 3 or 4, and there's very short and sweet tutorials where if you want to learn something in 3 to 4 minutes, you absolutely can. if you learn more by seeing someone like animate all the way through, like minute to an hour long tutorials, and there's even still like speed animates, like you can see someone animating in real time and they speed it up. Just taking advantage of that would be my main source of advice, as well as the 12 principles of animation and the animator survival kit. Those are absolute pluses for learning rig animation, because those fundamentals and principles don't go away when you start working with rigs.
Yeah, I find it really interesting to see how open artists and animators in this industry are to like sharing their work and showing people, especially like new artists, the process. When it would be so easy to just kind of hide your stuff and say like this is like my secret, I'm able to do this and no one else can see it. But instead of people are really open, they want to help people improve at the craft, which I think is really cool.
I absolutely love that. I think there was even a thing where I saw an animator doing some really good rig animations of a D&D podcast or something like that, and I really loved the way that they did easing. So I just messaged them on Twitter asking them how they did their easing, and I'm really happy that that they were just open about saying how they did it, and like that there's a lot of people doing like rig animations in their spare time now instead of just doing like the industry professional projects.
Bonnie, do you have advice for animators who are interested in working with 2D character rigs?
Yeah, well, like Jack and James already said, like there's so many resources at the moment on the internet, so it's invaluable to download a rig. Like there's so many high industry level rigs from industry professionals out there, either for free or you can pay whatever you want on Gumroad. My friend did a great dipper rig, and that's Colm. He's really good. But yeah.
His stuff is awesome.
Yeah, it's really cool. And what else I would say is to maybe join a community like the Harmony Discord. There's so many people that you can learn from. It's really fun to show your work as well and get feedback that's valuable. Yeah, and really try to have it be fun at first. So just take an audio clip of stuff that you really like and take a character rig that you love the character of and just try to be passionate about it, and then all the skills will come by itself as long as you're open to learning it. Yeah.
Bonnie, when you open a character rig, what makes you say this is a good character rig?
Ooh, that's a good question. I think the first thing I'd look at is if the node view is clear. If it's a mess, then I don't want to work with it. But yeah, I usually check the hierarchy and see how legs are connected. And a rig doesn't have to be complicated for it to be good. Sometimes I'm very happy to just have a few views and drawing exposures. It doesn't have to need master controllers or anything to work for me specifically. I'll have to. Yeah, I think just if it's really clean and clear, then it's very approachable to work with. And the more complicated doesn't mean it's better.
Definitely. James, when you open a character rig, what makes you think this is a good character rig?
If things don't like break immediately when I move things around, like sometimes you'll get like, and this is especially the rigger's fault, but you'll get like very complicated designs where like stuff is on the elbow and stuff like that, and when you move the arm, like the whatever's passed into the elbow will move up here, and it's just kind of a pain to move things around. It's like sometimes the rigging artist can't especially help that, you know. Sometimes you just have to deal with it as an animator. But I feel like if you can find creative solutions to get around that, that makes the rig better and more accessible to use for everybody. And yeah, like the others were saying, like good organization, node view organization. Deformers where needed. They don't need to be on every single thing, but it's helpful to have them at least on the limbs. And yeah, if you another thing to look for is if you hit the render view and there's no like seams or weird line things that pop up. That's always good. It means that the rigging artist has checked their work. So yeah.
To touch on something you said, I just want to say to any character designers who are watching this, please don't put tattoos or design elements on like elbows or knees.
Mhm.
Please. We're begging you.
Yes.
Jack, when you open up a character rig, what makes you think, this is a good character rig?
I feel like I'm an easy person to please. When I see that animate using animation tools is turned off on all of the drawings, I am the happiest person in the world. Because if you have it turned on, then that means when you insert a keyframe onto the entire rig, guess where keyframes are also ending up? On all of the drawing layers. And also when there's not anti-aliasing on any of the between like the arm and the forearm, or like the line art and the color art mixing together. As long as there's no anti-aliasing, I'm also happy because I don't have to worry about fixing it.
Oh yeah, so the issues where you have something that's cut and the thing that's cut in such a way that you see like little white dots in like the outline.
Yeah, and I've also had the situation where I'm working on something and I accidentally put the color art on the line art, and it'll just create like a giant seam around the joint. So all I have to do is just move the color art from the line art layer into the color art.
All right. Well, on that note, we are running out of time, but I want to just ask you all, where can our viewers find more of your work? So, Jack, where can our viewers find more of your work on the web?
You can go to my website, www.jackmuno.com. And if you don't want to type that up, you can just go to my Twitter at JackMuno. It should be listed as the link when you go to my profile.
All right. Bonnie, where can our viewers find more of your work?
So I'm most active on Instagram at the moment, and that's just my name, Bonnie Meer. I used to be on Twitter as well, but that's not the case anymore. So.
There's no more Twitter. It's X Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
James, where can your viewers find more of your work?
So you can just go to jtnanimation.com, and that'll have links to my reel and portfolio, as well as like links to my social media.
Yeah, as well as that really cool Troll Slayer rig you made.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Bonnie, Jack, and James, for joining us for today's discussion about animating with 2D rigs. And thank you to our viewers for joining in as well. If you'd like to try your hand at animating with 2D rigs, animators can download a fully featured 21-day trial of Harmony Premium from our website. The website is toonboom.com. And thank you all for joining in on this conversation, and be sure to tune in next time.